After 12 years of running multi-million-dollar projects, my company fired me to cut costs. They replaced me with the CEO's clueless nephew. Big mistake. Because when the biggest government contract of the decade came up, I knew exactly how to underbid them, and I took it. Within a year, their company collapsed, and I was the one standing on the construction site they thought would save them. I never thought loyalty could be treated like a liability, but that's exactly what happened to me. For more than a decade, I was the guy they called when things went wrong. Deadlines slipping. I pulled double shifts to get us back on track. Budgets blown. I negotiated with suppliers until we scraped by. Client unhappy. I'd sit in their office until I found a way to make it right. That was my life for 12 years as a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. We weren't flashy like the billion-dollar corporations you see on the news, but we were steady, reliable, the kind of company small cities trusted when they needed a bridge repaired or a school built. I thought I had job security. I thought I mattered. Turns out, I was just another line on a spreadsheet. It happened on a grey Tuesday morning. The kind where the rain makes everything feel colder than it should. My phone buzzed with a calendar invite, meeting with CEO, 9 a.m. I knew it wasn't good. CEOs don't call you into private meetings unless something's wrong. But even then, I couldn't have guessed how quickly everything would unravel. When I walked into his office, he didn't even bother with small talk. He folded his hands across his desk, looked me dead in the eye, and said the words that would burn into my memory. "We are making cuts. Unfortunately, your position has been deemed non-essential." Non-essential. After 12 years. I tried to argue, to reason, but he cut me off with corporate jargon about tight budgets and strategic restructuring. He didn't care that I'd delivered every project on time. He didn't care that my team respected me. He didn't even care that I'd given up weekends, holidays, and nights with my family to make him look good. He slid a folder across the desk, termination paperwork, and told me HR would assist with the transition. I walked out of that office numb. My team stared as I packed up my things. Some of the guys came over, furious on my behalf. Others just shook their heads, too scared to say anything. I'll never forget the look on Jake's face. He'd been my foreman for years, a tough guy with calloused hands and a dry sense of humor. But when he realized what was happening, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "This is bullsh*T, he muttered. "They can't run half these jobs without you." I gave him a weak smile and said, "Apparently, they think they can." I left the office that day with a cardboard box of personal items and a heart full of anger. But the final insult didn't come until 2 weeks later. I ran into one of my old co-workers at the grocery store. He hesitated before telling me the truth, but I pressed him until he caved. "They replaced you with the CEO's nephew," he said. "Kid's barely 24. No experience. Word is, he's only there because the family wanted him to learn the ropes." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give when the universe spits in your face. 12 years of dedication, replaced by nepotism. That was the moment the hurt turned into rage. I spent the next few weeks sending out resumes, networking, and sitting through interviews that felt beneath me. After all, I wasn't just some middle manager, I'd overseen multi-million-dollar projects. But apparently, being fired made people question your worth. Then came the call that changed everything. A competitor I'd butted heads with for years reached out. Let's call them Stonebridge Construction. We'd crossed paths on bids, fought tooth and nail for contracts. I respected them, even if I hated losing to them. Now they wanted me. The VP himself called and said, "We heard you're free. We could use a guy like you." At first, I hesitated. Jumping to a competitor felt like betrayal, even if my old company had tossed me aside. But then I remembered the smug look on my CEO's face when he called me non-essential. Betrayal? No. This was survival. Stonebridge offered me more money, better benefits, and most importantly, respect. They didn't treat me like a disposable cost. They treated me like an investment. So I signed on. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. A few months later, the biggest government contract of the decade opened up for bids. A massive highway expansion project. Hundreds of millions of dollars. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Every construction firm in the region wanted it. Including my old company. The second I heard the news, I knew this was my chance. See, here's the thing about government bids. On the surface, they are all about numbers, lowest bid wins. But anyone who's been in the business knows it's about credibility. The government doesn't just want a cheap quote. They want a company that can deliver on time, on budget, and without cutting corners. And I knew my old company inside and out. I knew they always underquoted labor costs, which led to delays. I knew which suppliers they were locked into, and how those suppliers were raising prices. I knew their project timeline tricks, the fake optimism they threw into every proposal. And I knew their CEO was desperate. He needed this contract to save face after losing investors. So I built Stonebridge's bid around their weaknesses. Where my old company would underestimate labor, I built in realistic projections and backed them up with data. Where they were stuck with overpriced suppliers, I found cheaper alternatives without sacrificing quality. Where they promised impossible timelines, I promised achievable milestones with proof of past performance. Our bid was lean, clean, and brutally honest. I could already imagine my old CEO sweating bullets, as he realized I was now the one standing in his way. The weeks leading up to the bid decision were tense. My old co-workers started whispering, sending me texts. The nephew's floundering. He doesn't know how to run the teams. Management is panicking. They are banking everything on this highway contract. They didn't see you coming, man. They thought you were done. I kept my head down and focused. But inside, I was burning with satisfaction. The same company that had called me non-essential was now fighting for survival, and I was the one holding the knife. When the day came to present our proposal, I stood in that government office with Stonebridge's logo on my chest. Across the room, I saw my old CEO and his nephew. The CEO's face turned red when he saw me. I gave him a polite smile, the kind that said, "Remember me." We presented our case with confidence, numbers solid, timeline airtight. When it was over, I walked out knowing we'd nailed it. But I also knew part B of this story was about to begin, the part where revenge turns into reality. Because if Stonebridge won this contract, my old company wouldn't just lose business. They'd lose everything. The decision came down faster than I expected. Usually, government contracts drag on for months, but this one was different. The stakes were high, and they wanted construction underway before the end of the fiscal year. When my phone rang with the news, I almost didn't answer it. But when I did, the voice on the other end told me exactly what I had been waiting to hear. "Congratulations," the representative said. "Stonebridge has been awarded the highway expansion project. Your proposal stood out as the most realistic and reliable." I sat there in silence for a moment, letting the words sink in. 12 years of my life had been poured into making my old company successful. 12 years of sacrifices, long nights, and stress. And in one swift decision, I had helped deliver the blow that would send them spiraling. The next week, I arrived at the project site for the ceremonial groundbreaking. Officials in suits shook hands, cameras clicked, and reporters scribbled notes. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of my old CEO standing with his nephew. They weren't there to celebrate, they were there because they had to be seen. Their faces told the story. The CEO looked pale, tight-lipped, furious. The nephew wore a stiff smile, clearly out of his depth. When our eyes met, I gave a small nod. Not smug, not arrogant, just a simple acknowledgement. He turned away, his jaw tight. From that moment on, the tide shifted fast. My old company had bet everything on that contract. Investors who had been wary before pulled their funding. Subcontractors who had been loyal for years began calling me, asking if they could get onto the Stonebridge job. Word traveled quickly in construction. Everyone knew that without this highway project, my old company was running on fumes. Inside their offices, chaos reigned. Friends who still worked there sent me messages. The nephew had been put in charge of several smaller municipal projects, but nothing went smoothly. Crews complained he didn't understand scheduling. Suppliers balked when he tried to negotiate contracts he didn't understand. Clients called daily to complain about delays and mismanagement. The more mistakes piled up, the more desperate the CEO became. He slashed budgets further, cut staff, and tried to push impossible deadlines. It only made things worse. Meanwhile, life at Stonebridge felt like a breath of fresh air. I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I was trusted, respected, and most importantly, heard. The highway project was grueling, yes, but it was also invigorating. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that mattered, not just patching holes in a sinking ship. Every milestone we hit was proof that I hadn't been the problem, my old company's leadership had. By mid-year, cracks in my old company's foundation were impossible to ignore. Their stock price tanked. Lawsuits started piling up from clients who had been promised one thing and delivered another. Suppliers cut ties. Employees fled in droves. A friend told me the office felt like a ghost town, empty desks, silent phones, managers pacing the halls with worry etched on their faces. The nephew, once touted as the company's future, was now a punchline. Crews called him Clipboard Kenny because he spent more time pretending to check documents than actually leading. I didn't have to lift a finger to make any of it happen. That was the sweetest part. My revenge wasn't sabotage. It wasn't some secret scheme. It was simply being better at my job than they were at theirs. All I had to do was show up, work hard, and let their arrogance collapse in on itself. And collapse it did. The final straw came when a city project, a new community center, was delayed by nearly 6 months. Parents were furious, local politicians were humiliated, and the city council voted to terminate the contract. The loss didn't just cost them money, it cost them credibility. With no projects to fund operations, creditors demanded repayment. Within weeks, the company filed for bankruptcy. I'll admit, when I first heard the news, I poured myself a drink and sat on my porch, staring out at the horizon. There was no joy in it, not really. Just a deep, quiet sense of justice. They had called me non-essential, treated me like disposable waste, and replaced me with a kid who had no idea what he was doing. And now, because of those choices, everything they had built was gone. The CEO tried to save face, of course. Rumors swirled that he was blaming the economy, blaming the government, blaming unfair competition. But people in the industry knew the truth. They knew his arrogance and greed had driven the company into the ground. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to start fresh with a new consulting firm, but no one wanted to work with him. His name was Mud. The nephew disappeared entirely, retreating to some safe family business far from construction. As for me, my career soared. Stonebridge promoted me to Director of Operations within a year. I was overseeing not just the highway project, but a half-dozen other contracts across the region. My salary tripled. I had a team I trusted, bosses who respected me, and clients who valued my honesty. On the day the first stretch of highway officially opened, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by dignitaries, engineers, and workers who had poured their sweat into the asphalt. Reporters snapped pictures, and for the first time in years, I felt like the world saw me for what I really was, not disposable, not replaceable, but essential. That night, after the celebrations, I went home and pulled out the termination folder my old CEO had slid across his desk years earlier. I had kept it tucked away in a drawer, a reminder of what I had endured. I stared at the words non-essential printed in black ink. Then I fed the pages into my fireplace and watched them curl into ash. Sometimes revenge doesn't come from plotting or scheming. Sometimes it's as simple as refusing to stay down, as simple as proving your worth in the face of those who dismissed you. My old company thought they had cut dead weight. Instead, they cut the very backbone that held them together. And when the dust settled, I didn't just survive, I thrived. I didn't walk into the new office with arrogance. I walked in with quiet determination. I knew what my former company had overlooked, what they had dismissed as too much detail, or not important. Those blind spots had cost us before, but now, they were the exact tools I could use to destroy them. When the government project's bidding phase began, my old company strutted into the process, as though the contract was theirs by birthright. They didn't even hide it. They had long relationships with local officials, a reputation for being big enough to handle it, and the CEO's smug confidence that they were untouchable. But what he didn't know was that I had been the one who kept those relationships alive. I was the one who ensured bids were not just competitive, but sustainable. Without me, all he had was a pile of half-baked estimates and an ego larger than the skyscrapers we once dreamed of building. I spent nights combing through every inch of the proposal requirements. I didn't just read the fine print, I memoized it. I knew exactly how inspectors thought, how auditors caught inconsistencies, and how regulators punished sloppy documentation. My team listened as I laid out the strategy. We wouldn't just underbid, we'd build a bulletproof plan that addressed every concern before the government even asked. The submission day arrived. I saw some of my old colleagues at the courthouse lobby, holding thick binders with their company's glossy logo. They gave me a mix of sympathetic smiles and cautious nods. Some looked guilty. They hadn't stood up for me when I was fired. Others just looked tired. I couldn't blame them. The CEO's nephew strutted in wearing an ill-fitting suit, talking loudly about how the contract was in the bag. I couldn't resist catching his eye and giving him a small, knowing smile. He didn't understand it, but the CEO did when he spotted me. His face tightened, jaw-locking. He realized I wasn't out of the game. Months of silence followed while the bids were reviewed. For a while, I questioned myself. Had I gone too far? Was I setting myself up for failure if the government decided loyalty to an established firm mattered more than the strength of the proposal? But then, one morning, I received an email that would change everything. Congratulations! Your firm has been awarded the primary contract for Phase 1 of the Riverside Development Project. I sat at my desk in stunned silence before breaking into laughter. My team celebrated like we had won the lottery. And in a way, we had. This wasn't just a contract. This was the lifeline that would secure our place in the industry for years to come. Meanwhile, my old company had not only lost, they had been humiliated. Their bid had been flagged for multiple inaccuracies, outdated safety compliance measures, and bloated costs that couldn't be justified. In short, it was sloppy. Without me cleaning up their mess, they had exposed exactly how weak their internal structure really was. But the story didn't end there. Losing that contract wasn't just a financial blow, it was a reputational one. Government officials started whispering that maybe the firm had lost its edge. Rival companies that had always been afraid to compete against them suddenly felt bold. Within a year, they lost 2 more major bids, each time to competitors who had learned from my playbook. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not gloating but satisfied. The CEO, once untouchable, was suddenly scrambling to keep his empire from collapsing. Rumors spread about late payments to suppliers, layoffs in their accounting department, and project delays stacking up. I even heard that the nephew who had replaced me had quietly resigned after a disastrous mismanagement scandal on a smaller project. Meanwhile, my own career had taken off. The Riverside project became a showcase of efficiency and modern construction techniques. We came in under budget and ahead of schedule, something almost unheard of in government projects. Word spread fast. I was invited to speak at industry conferences, quoted in trade magazines, and approached by investors who wanted to back my firm's next big endeavor. But the true revenge moment came 2 years later. Another massive government project was announced, bigger than Riverside, more ambitious, the kind of contract that could make or break companies. Both my firm and my old one were in the running again. I'll never forget the pre-bid meeting. The CEO of my old company walked in looking a decade older, his shoulders slumped, his confidence gone. He scanned the room and froze when he saw me standing at the head of my team, briefing my colleagues with authority. For the first time, he wasn't looking down at me. He was looking up. We won that contract, too. And that was the final nail in the coffin. Within 6 months, my old company filed for bankruptcy protection. The empire that had once seemed unshakable was dismantled piece by piece, sold off to pay debts. Suppliers who had been mistreated for years refused to extend credit. Former employees scattered to new firms, some even joining me. One evening, I drove past the old headquarters. The building was dark, a for lease sign planted in front. I sat in my car and thought about the day I had been escorted out of that same building, my box of personal items in hand, humiliated and angry. I thought about the CEO's smug face telling me it was just business. And now, here we were. His empire gone. My future brighter than ever. People ask me if I regret it, if it feels cruel to have played such a direct role in another company's downfall. But the truth is, they destroyed themselves. I just refused to let them destroy me in the process. I used the knowledge I had earned with sweat and sleepless nights to build something better, something fairer. And if my success happened to highlight their failures, so be it. At the end of the day, revenge wasn't about watching them fall. It was about standing tall on the foundation they said I wasn't worth. And as I looked out at the skyline I helped shape, I realized I had built more than just buildings. I had built my own redemption.